Hello, my wise listeners, and welcome back to another episode of The Wisdom of Sex. I'm your host, Dr. Wisdom. Today, we're going there. Wet dreams, astrosex, or is it paranormal sex encounters? Many have experienced these mysterious phenomena, but often misunderstand or dismiss them. Let's start by breaking down the science behind these experiences, then explore psychology, and even dip into some mystical perspectives. If you've ever wondered what happens in those twilight moments when you wake up having an orgasm, or if you felt an otherworldly connection during a dream or sleep paralysis, this episode is for you. Let's get into it. To kick off today's episode, I want to share a story from one of our listeners that takes us deep into the realm of nighttime encounters. A story that blurs the line between dream, desire, and something otherworldly. This listener, we'll call her Sarah, experienced what she described as an astral sex encounter during a lucid dream. It began with sensations so vivid they felt almost more real than reality itself, leaving her questioning whether it was simply a dream or something beyond. Sarah lived alone, and one night she felt herself partly awake, lying on her stomach with a heavy presence pressing on top of her. She could feel its breath on her neck, and then suddenly, an intense feeling of penetration. She was frightened but found herself paralyzed, unable to move or resist. And here's the wildest part. It brought her to an orgasm. She fully woke up in the middle of this climax, stunned and confused by what had just happened. But that wasn't the end. About a week later, it happened again. And then, as if on a schedule, it became a near daily occurrence. Although she was both terrified and intrigued, Sarah started looking forward to these nighttime visits. Over time, she says she even learned to communicate with this presence telepathically, and she found she could influence what happened, even changing the positions. She came to believe this being was an incubus, a spirit or entity known in folklore to engage in sexual activity with humans while they sleep. She never actually saw the creature, but felt deeply connected to it, describing these encounters as some of the best sexual experiences she had ever had. What convinced Sarah that this was something more than just sleep paralysis was the pattern of its visits. She noticed that every time she dated someone seriously, the encounters stopped. When her new partner would stay over, it simply wouldn't happen. And eventually, after she got married, these nighttime encounters ceased altogether. Sarah's story is both haunting and fascinating. Was this purely a psychological phenomenon, an advanced form of lucid dreaming or sleep paralysis? Or could it have been something more, an encounter with a being beyond our understanding? Sarah felt connected to this presence in a way that went beyond any usual experience, and she's not alone. Stories like hers have been shared across cultures, pointing to a phenomenon that sits at the intersection of psychology, spirituality, and maybe even the paranormal. So, what do you think? Are these nighttime encounters a reflection of our deepest subconscious desires? Or could there be more at work in these mysterious twilight hours? Well, let's get down to basics. First, let's start with what a wet dream is, because some may believe that all this astral sex or paranormal sex is just a wet dream. What exactly is a wet dream? A wet dream, also known as a nocturnal emission, is a natural physiological experience where a person experiences arousal or even orgasm during sleep, often without any intentional stimulation. Typically, wet dreams occur during the REM, rapid eye movement stage of sleep, the same stage associated with vivid dreams. During REM sleep, our brains are very active and we're likely to have emotionally intense or vivid dreams, including sexual ones. When we dream about intimate encounters, our bodies can respond just as if we were awake, with increased blood flow, arousal, and even orgasm. For men, this can lead to ejaculation, while for women, it can cause physical arousal or vaginal lubrication. The interesting part is that wet dreams aren't exclusive to teenagers or those going through puberty. While they're most common during adolescence, wet dreams can happen at any age. They're a natural part of how our bodies and minds process sexuality, even when we're not consciously thinking about it. In essence, wet dreams are a product of the brain's power to create vivid experiences that the body reacts to physically. They remind us of how closely our mental and physical worlds are connected and how our subconscious can bring our inner desires to life, even when we're fast asleep. So keep that in mind as we go through this episode and you decide, is all this in our minds and just wet dreams or something more? First, let's examine sleep paralysis and how it could connect to these astral or paranormal encounters. From a scientific standpoint, sleep paralysis happens when your brain wakes up from REM sleep, but your body remains in the paralyzed state it naturally enters during deep sleep. This state, called muscle atonia, keeps us from physically acting out our dreams and typically lasts only while we're asleep. But if we wake up while still paralyzed, we can find ourselves unable to move, sometimes feeling intense pressure on our chest and often sensing a presence in the room. This can be incredibly disorienting and, for many, terrifying. Sleep paralysis episodes usually last only a few seconds to a couple of minutes, but they can feel much longer to the person experiencing them. During this time, it's common for people to see or sense shadowy figures, looming presences, or even entities approaching them. Many describe these visions as feeling both intensely real and utterly nightmarish. Interestingly, many cultures have their own supernatural interpretations of sleep paralysis. Across centuries and continents, people have described encounters with demons, witches, and spirits sitting on their chests, pinning them down, or even engaging in intimate acts. In some African and Caribbean folklore, it's known as being ridden by a witch. In medieval European tales, a creature called the mare would press on the chest of a sleeping person, which is where we get the term nightmare. These stories reflect how sleep paralysis has long been linked with the supernatural, seen as a form of dark visitation rather than just a sleep disorder. From a scientific perspective, though, the sensations and hallucinations are explained as the brain's way of trying to make sense of the body's temporary paralysis. Your mind is fully awake, yet still somewhat in dream mode, which can lead to intense and vivid hallucinations. The pressure on the chest, for example, may be a psychological reaction to the inability to move, amplified by the brain's need to fill in the blanks of what's happening. When the mind is caught between states of sleep and wakefulness, it can create scenarios and sensations that feel incredibly real, yet defy waking logic. So, how does this relate to Sarah's story? This is where things get fascinating. In the same way sleep paralysis can conjure shadowy figures, some people report that these hallucinations or sensations take on a sexual nature, leading to experiences that feel like intimate encounters with an unseen partner. Because the mind is partially dreaming, the experiences can feel very physical and very real. However, those who believe in astral or supernatural encounters argue that it's not just hallucination, but rather a portal to another plane, where spirits or entities may be able to connect with us in that liminal state. Either way, there is no way to prove it's not a paranormal encounter or that it's all in our minds. So whether you interpret these encounters as purely psychological or as something more mystical, the overlap between sleep paralysis, sexual sensations, and these vivid otherworldly experiences is profound. It raises questions about the boundaries of consciousness and just what the mind, or perhaps the spirit, is capable of experiencing in these twilight moments. Now let's dive into astral projection. This is the belief that during certain states, such as deep sleep or meditation, our soul or consciousness can actually leave the physical body and journey into another realm, often referred to as the astral plane. Unlike ordinary dreams, astral projection is described as an intentional or spontaneous separation of the soul from the body, allowing it to explore other dimensions or realms of existence. People who experience this say it feels as if they're floating above themselves or traveling to new spaces far beyond their physical surroundings. I actually had an experience with this myself, and it's one of those memories that stuck with me for years. When I was a kid, I remember having a strange, vivid experience that felt like I was outside my body. I didn't understand what it was back then, just brushed it off as a bizarre, slightly terrifying dream. Fast forward to when I was dating my then boyfriend, and one day we're sitting with his uncle, who starts talking about his experience with astral travel. He explained it, and suddenly, everything clicked. That's what I experienced as a kid, It was like the missing piece of the puzzle. From that point on, I started reading everything I could on the topic. Dr. Robert Monroe's books on astral projection became my go-to guides, and let me tell you, they opened up a whole new world. According to Monroe, once you push yourself up and out of your body and begin the journey, whatever you imagine, you can see and experience. If you think about the Eiffel Tower, you're there. If you want to visit a person, you can. It's truly like mental teleportation with all the wonder and sometimes fear that comes with it. But here's where things got intense. Once I started practicing, I found myself astral projecting all the time. And honestly, it was terrifying. Just like Monroe describes, I could push my upper body up, look around the room. I never could get completely out of my body, just my upper body like the yoga position cobra. But every time, my mind would start racing. I'd think, what if I see something evil? What if I end up somewhere dark, or even in hell? Monroe says that whatever we can imagine, we can experience in these states, good or bad. He himself experienced this and described what he saw. Let me tell you, terrifying. Every time I got close, that fear would take over, and I'd immediately snap back into my body, waking myself up in a panic. I know, this probably sounds a little woo-woo to some, but it was a truly intense experience. Looking back, I haven't tried it in years, partly because it scares me and partly because I don't think about it much these days, but who knows? Maybe, after talking about it on this episode, it may happen. Okay, back to the episode. Throughout history, astral projection has been a key part of many spiritual and cultural traditions. Ancient Egyptian, Tibetan, and even some indigenous American cultures have spoken of out-of-body experiences as a means of spiritual growth, healing, and even communication with the divine. In these accounts, people often report meeting spiritual beings, traveling through starry realms, or experiencing intense and heightened sensations. For them, this journey into the astral plane represents a spiritual awakening, an encounter with their true essence or higher realms. Today, the concept of astral projection continues to be popular, particularly within modern spiritual communities. These communities often teach techniques for reaching an out-of-body state through deep meditation, visualization, and breath work. There are even step-by-step guides designed to help practitioners move into a relaxed state where they can attempt to leave their body, float above themselves, and explore a reality beyond the physical. But what happens when astral projection and sexual energy mix? That's where we get into the intriguing concept of astral sex. Astral sex is described as an encounter on the astral plane, where individuals report having intimate experiences with beings, or even with other people projecting into the same space. For some, these encounters feel more powerful than anything they've experienced in their physical body, with heightened sensations and a deep sense of connection. People who have these experiences often describe the energy exchange as incredibly intense, with physical sensations that can feel like tingling, warmth, or even a full-body rush. This sounds a lot like what Sarah experienced. Now, I want to take a slight detour that will make sense in a second. Let's talk about twin flames. If you haven't heard what a twin flame is, let me explain. The twin flame concept goes beyond the idea of a soulmate. Twin flames are often described as two halves of the same soul that were separated and incarnated in two different people. According to this belief, when twin flames meet, there's an intense, almost magnetic pull, a feeling that you've finally encountered the other half of yourself. This connection is typically described as deeper than romantic love, involving a spiritual awakening and a powerful journey of growth, healing, and self-discovery. But here's the twist. Twin flame relationships are often challenging because they mirror both the good and the unresolved aspects of ourselves, forcing us to confront things we might prefer to avoid. What does that have to do with astral sex? Well, when it comes to astral sex, some believe that you can have astral sex with your twin flame, and this twin flame astral sex get intense. People who believe in twin flames often report feeling connected to their twin on an energetic level, even across distance or time. Some say they can feel their twin flame's presence in dreams or during meditation, and in some cases this connection deepens into an intimate, energetic experience, astral sex. This experience is described as more intense than physical intimacy, transcending the body and tapping into a shared energy that can feel profoundly spiritual, healing, and even life-changing. Those who've had these encounters often say that astral sex with a twin flame feels incredibly real, with sensations that mirror or even exceed physical touch. It's believed that souls are free from physical limitations in the astral plane, so twin flames can experience a merging of energies that feels deeply intimate and fulfilling, sometimes described as a sacred union. The idea is that the connection is pure on this astral level, free from the conflicts and barriers that might exist in the physical realm. So, is this just a product of a vivid imagination, or could there be something more to it? While science has yet to weigh in, those who've had these experiences believe they're real and often describe them as life-altering. Twin flames and astral sex offer a glimpse into a type of connection that defies conventional boundaries, suggesting that love, attraction, and intimacy might not be limited to the physical world. Whether you're a believer or just curious, the twin flame phenomenon reminds us of the power of connection and how sometimes the intangible experiences feel the most real. And unlike sleep paralysis, which is largely explained by science, astral projection and astral sex exist in a more mystical space where science has yet to find a clear explanation. But for those who believe in it, these experiences are real, profound, and sometimes even life-changing. To them, astral sex isn't just about physical sensation, it's an energetic connection, a merging of souls beyond the boundaries of the body. Maybe this is what Sarah was experiencing. Whether you view these experiences as metaphysical or as powerful psychological projections, the blending of astral projection with sexual energy gives a whole new dimension to intimacy, one that transcends the physical and taps into the spiritual or energetic self. So let's continue exploring these twilight encounters, where science and spirituality intertwine, and see where they might lead us. People who've experienced astral sex claim that the sensations can feel just as real, if not more intense, than physical sex, like Sarah. And unlike a lucid dream, astral sex is often said to involve real sensations and an intense, energetic exchange. It feels physical, but operates on a spiritual or energetic level, tapping into something that many people describe as a merging of energies rather than just physical sensations. People often report the feeling of another presence and describe a connection that's vivid, lasting, and deeply profound. For some, this encounter happens with a known partner who's also projecting, or in some cases with an unknown entity, which can be intriguing or even a bit intimidating. So while lucid dreaming is essentially a creation of your own mind, astral sex is said to be an experience beyond the self, a crossing into a non-physical realm where the connection with another consciousness or energy can feel profoundly real. Whether or not you believe in it, the differences reported by those who experience it make astral sex a truly unique phenomenon that goes beyond ordinary dreaming. Now let's talk about where astral sex and sleep paralysis intersect. Many people report feeling sexually charged sensations during sleep paralysis episodes, which they believe are tied to an astral or spiritual presence. But why does this happen? One theory is that when we're in a state of sleep paralysis, our brains are in a liminal space between wakefulness and dreaming. This is the same state where many believe we can access the astral plane. So the sensations people feel during sleep paralysis may be an overlap of these two experiences, where the mind is conscious but still interacting with the dream or astral world. Is this all in the mind, or are we truly entering another plane of consciousness? Let's explore both sides, scientific and spiritual. The debate between science and spirituality when it comes to astral sex is absolutely fascinating, and honestly, it's likely one that may never be fully settled. On one side, we have scientists, neurologists, and psychologists who argue that experiences like sleep paralysis and astral sex are simply the products of our brains. According to this perspective, when we're in a state of sleep paralysis, our brains, caught between waking and dreaming, can create incredibly vivid sensations and even hallucinations to bridge the gap between the two worlds. In this semi-lucid state, the brain might produce physical sensations and visuals that feel intensely real, though they are, scientifically speaking, all happening within the mind. But then there's the spiritual side of the debate. Believers argue that astral sex goes far beyond hallucination or the tricks of a sleepy brain. From a spiritual perspective, astral sex is a real, profound experience that happens on a different plane of existence entirely. Those who engage in or study astral projection believe that the astral plane is a dimension where our consciousness can interact with other energies, spirits, or even other souls, creating connections that feel as real, or perhaps even more real, than physical encounters. For these believers, astral sex is seen as a form of deep connection, a spiritual awakening, or even a karmic interaction that goes beyond the limitations of the physical body. So while science and spirituality may have vastly different explanations, both sides agree on one thing. These experiences feel intensely real to those who have them. Whether they occur entirely in the mind or on a non-physical plane, there's no denying the lasting impact they can have on people. The science-spirituality debate may never be fully settled, and maybe it doesn't need to be. What we do know is that these encounters continue to fascinate and mystify, pushing us to explore the boundaries of consciousness, reality, and what it truly means to connect. For those who experience sleep paralysis and find it unsettling, there are actually some ways to minimize these episodes. Practicing good sleep hygiene is key. Maintaining a regular sleep schedule, avoiding stimulants before bed, and keeping stress levels in check can all make a difference. Mindfulness and meditation are also powerful tools. By grounding yourself mentally, you can often reduce the intensity of these experiences and help them feel less overwhelming. Learning to stay calm and focus on your breathing during sleep paralysis episodes can sometimes ease the sensation of being stuck. Now, if you're someone who's curious about exploring astral projection or even astral sex, it's important to approach these practices with caution and intention. These experiences can be exhilarating but can also feel intense or disorienting if you're unprepared. Setting clear intentions before sleep, like visualizing positive or protective energy, can help create a sense of safety. Many people also find establishing a simple grounding ritual helpful, like imagining a protective light around you or repeating an affirmation that sets your boundaries for the experience. As you explore these realms, these practices can serve as a kind of safety net. Well, as we start to wrap up today's episode, remember it's perfectly okay to take it slow. Exploring the unknown, especially the realms beyond our usual consciousness, can be a profound experience. With patience, respect for the process, and clear intentions, you can create a safe way to learn about these mysteries, whether they happen in the mind or on another plane. So what do you think? Wet dream, astral sex, twin flame sex, or something more? If you have any stories, thoughts, or questions, I'd love to hear from you. If you want to read some books about it, like Robert Monroe, I will put a link on my website, drheatherwisdom.com. Well, our time is up for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in today to The Wisdom of Sex. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. You can find me on social media or visit our website to share your stories and suggest future topics. Until then, be curious, don't be rude, know your limits, and stay wise.